So you're thinking about moving to Japan in 2025. After all, the yen has consistently been going down over the past few months, and you think that whatever money you've saved back home could actually allow you to have a very nice life in this country. But before you pack your bags, you should remember that there's more to consider than just sushi and cherry blossoms. From groundbreaking career opportunities to the challenges that no one really talks about, moving to Japan could be a life-changing decision, for better or for worse. But don't worry, because by the end of this video, you'll be able to make the decision whether Japan is going to be your next home, your next adventure, or if it's better left as a dream and move on with your life. Now, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Gabriel. I've been living in Tokyo, Japan for more than 6 years, where I currently run and manage my own business. So stick around, because we'll be diving deep into the reasons why you should or shouldn't move to Japan in 2025. And I think one of the first points that I would like to talk about in favor of moving to Japan would definitely have to be the career opportunities and certain innovations that are happening in the market right now. Now, Japan continues to push the boundaries of technology and innovation, particularly in fields like AI, robotics, and as of late, in many green technologies as well. And now, with the government support for startups and entrepreneurs, 2025 could actually be a golden time for people like you and me. People who are looking to come to Japan and cooperate and collaborate with other professionals and innovators to create your own businesses and projects. Now, at the end of 2022, or maybe the beginning of 2023, the government actually launched a 5-year plan to incentivize startups and entrepreneurship in Japan. And the aim of this plan would be to create a very nurturing ecosystem that would incentivize and accelerate the growth of startups and innovate already existing larger companies as well. So it could actually prove to be a very good opportunity for those of you who are aiming to come to Japan to broaden your business horizons and come here to create your own businesses or becoming entrepreneurs in this country. At least that's what I did, and I can definitely say it's been worth it. Now, on the other side of things, depending on the kind of person you are, I think the language barrier might be a good reason against moving to Japan. Let me explain. Now, I've never been someone to be against learning a new language, but you have to understand that, yes, while it's true that Japan is the biggest city in the world, and as cosmopolitan as it might be, English as a spoken language is not as commonplace as it could be in other big cities around the world. And of course, learning a new language and even mastering a new language can be time-consuming, it can take a lot of effort, and in some cases, it can also take some financial incentive. For those of us who are not willing or not interested in making those efforts, you'll find that your everyday interactions are going to become more and more frustrating with time. And I think that could also be one of your main obstacles when it comes to you coming to Japan and carving your own path as an entrepreneur. Not only that, but you should also be aware that most of the paperwork and most of the documents you'll be dealing with will be mostly in Japanese, with its 3 writing systems all mixed together. And in many cases, for example, particularly in the case of certain contracts or bank documents, they specifically want you to be the one to fill in physically the document yourself. Even if you have someone else with you who could do it, even if you have your partner or your wife or your husband or even your translator, they want it to be you for the sake of legitimacy, I guess. So if you don't have at least a very basic understanding of reading, writing, and speaking the language, then I think you'll be finding some obstacles that will be very hard to surmount. Now, I'm not saying that this is definitely a must-do and that you must absolutely master the language, but having a basic understanding is definitely going to take you a long way. So I guess depending on the kind of person you are, I would have to put the language barrier on the list of reasons against moving to Japan. Now, for my next point on the list of good reasons, I would like to talk about the high quality of life. Yeah, it's true that Japan has a very high quality of life, not only in the big cities, but also out into the more rural areas. And it also has, fortunately, an excellent healthcare system. Let me quickly illustrate my point by telling you a quick personal story about how I almost lost a toe. Now, early last year, my son was very young, and as a consequence, I was also very sleep deprived. And one day, after a long day of work, I was making dinner as I tend to do, and without noticing, I dropped a kitchen knife. And in my sleepless stupor, my first instinct was to actually stick my foot out to stop the knife. That's something I tend to do whenever I drop something. I just stick my foot out to soften the fall, and maybe it will not make so much noise, so my son will continue to sleep, I thought. But what I didn't think is that this was not going to work with a knife. So what happened is that the knife comfortably landed on the top of my foot, blade side, of course, and it left an extremely clean cut over the top of my foot, severing one of the tendons in two instantly. There was some blood loss, of course, and what I didn't notice at the time is that I had also lost complete mobility of my big toe. But again, in my sleepless stupidity, I just bandaged it up and went to bed. And the next day, of course, is when I noticed that I couldn't move my toe, and well, that's not fine. So after some deliberation, I went to the doctor and they took care of everything. They decided that they were operate immediately, and the operation took about 3 hours. I was completely under because they have to open your foot like a book and reattach the tendon basically. And I ended up spending about 3 full days in the hospital. And fortunately, this was all covered by my healthcare provider, the healthcare system here in Japan. And the healthcare system here in Japan works in a very simple way, and depending on your age and your income, will actually fit into one of 3 categories. You'll either pay 10%, 20%, or 30% of all medical expenses. And me, because of my age and my income, I fall into the 30% category. At the end, this whole process was a couple of $100, a few $100, maybe around $500, with all the hospital stay, all the operations and everything. Not only that, but also, of course, I'd like to talk about the care, the quality of the service. The doctor, of course, great doctor. He had a very good sense of humor, which I appreciated, but also the nurses did an incredible job. Just the amount of care that they put into the work that they do is really remarkable, and I'm absolutely grateful for the work that they did. And even after that, I had to go for about 6 months to physical therapy, and each physical therapy session is about $1 or $2, like 300 yen. And now, well, my toe is completely fine, if you'd like to know. I have complete mobility, no problems, and it also didn't completely disintegrate my wallet. Now, it's also worth noting that the healthcare system here in Japan also covers dental care. Now, I'm aware that in many other places in the world, that's not the case. For example, I know that in Switzerland, that's not the case. And as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, in the States, that's also not the case. But fortunately, here in Japan, dental work is also covered by your health insurance. Now, do keep in mind that for the cases in which you have to pay 20% or 10% of all your medical expenses, that's generally saved for the elderly, whether you're 70 or 75 years old respectively. However, healthcare for children from the age of 0 up to the age of 15 is completely free. So if you have children, any and all medical expenses that they'll have will be free until they turn 15 years old. So yeah, Japan does have great healthcare. It also has impeccable transportation systems and a lot of safety, not only in the big cities, but also in the rural areas as well. I'm sure many of you have heard stories of people that leave their wallets in the restaurants and then they come back a few hours later and they're still there. And me personally, I see it basically on the daily when you go to a coffee place and people leave their belongings on the table to basically save their seat, and they go to the bathroom or they go order another coffee and they leave their wallets or they leave their phones or their expensive laptops to save their place. That is something that, of course, gives you a lot of peace. When you see the sense of community and the sense of solidarity that exists in this country, that leaves you feeling very comfortable in a country like this one. So without a doubt, of course, the high quality of life goes onto the good side of things. Now, on the other side of the high quality of life is the high cost of living. And yeah, Japan, particularly in the big cities, can get very expensive. Now, keep in mind that Tokyo, for example, is a city where space is very limited. So if you want to rent or buy a property, depending on the area, you'll be spending a lot of money for a very small space. Here in Tokyo, for example, if you want to buy a house or a small plot of land, it can easily go over $1 million in certain areas of the city. Now, of course, that's not going to be the case in every part of the city, but if you want to live comfortably, if you want to live in a place where you can make some noise and where the walls are not paper thin and you'll have lots of noise concerns with your neighbors and so on, or maybe you'd like to have children, and as you know, children can be noisy, then you need a house that's solidly built, and that means you also have to invest a lot more in your living arrangements. On the other hand, if you come to Japan by yourself, you can still find very cheap studio apartments, even though, like I said before, you might have some very strict noise restrictions surrounding those types of arrangements. But I guess that's all par for the course when you live in the biggest city in the world. Now, another good reason to move to Japan would be, of course, the unique cultural experiences that you can have in this country. Now, as you all know, Japan has lots of festivals, lots of different celebrations throughout the year, either to celebrate the change of the seasons or particular national holidays and things like that. And that is always a great way to immerse yourself in the culture and in your surrounding community. You have, of course, tea ceremonies, you have matsuri, you have ancient cities like Kyoto and Nara, and on the other hand, of course, you have extremely modern metropolis like Tokyo and Osaka. And as a side note, when you come to Japan, whether as a tourist or as a resident, don't be afraid to get off the beaten path. Now, we all know that generally when people come to Japan, they end up going to the same big cities, to the same small villages, and to the same green areas. But there are many, many other wonderful places in this country that are actually not very well known and not at all frequented by tourists. tourists. So my best advice would be to ask the locals, ask the people around you, where do they go on holidays? Because there are many wonderful places that you can also discover here. Think of places like Karuizawa or Nasu Shiobara, which are also wonderful places, and you will never have to deal with things like over-tourism. But now, of course, as another reason against moving to Japan is that if you want to come here, you'll also have to deal with very strict immigration policies. Now, Japan has very strict and stringent rules when it comes to immigration, particularly for long-term residents. For many of us, it can be tough to secure a permanent residence or even a citizenship, and even obtaining a simple visa can often depend on very specific qualifications or even company sponsorships. So I think that could also be one of the biggest obstacles you could face when you start trying to materialize your idea of coming to live in Japan. For some, it takes longer than for others, and there's not really ever a clear way to know how long it might take you to get your permanent residence or your citizenship or your visa. Because depending on your particular circumstances, you'll have different documents, different requirements, and different obstacles to overcome. But if you'd like to learn more about the visa and residency process, then I highly suggest you go watch these two videos right here, because they'll give you a lot more useful and helpful information. So go watch them, and I'll see you over there.